Well, as the current U.S. president promises a peaceful transition, European leaders are also busy making plans, meeting in Budapest today to discuss common challenges, including a change in power in the United States and a president in Donald Trump, who, the last time he was in office, created great tensions in the transatlantic relationship. Well, to talk about this, we're now joined by Roland. He is a former Foreign Affairs advisor to Prime Minister Trudeau. He's now a professor and the director of the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa. Roland, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Listen, I want to begin, not surprisingly, in Budapest today, because we did hear from the gathering of European leaders in Hungary, and they have essentially committed to increase their defense spending so that they can mutually defend Europe without depending on the United States. How much of that is an expression of concern about Donald Trump?
I think it's very much an expression of concern because they're very aware of what he's been saying for a long time, which is that Europe and Canada, other members of NATO, should be paying more for the security of NATO as a whole and less reliant on the United States. So I think it's a little bit of preemptive appeal to Donald Trump. But it's not like this is new because even the Biden administration and previous administrations have also been calling for greater contribution from allies.
Interesting, because as you say, it is consistent, except that with Donald Trump, he's been very direct about it. Certainly was the first time he was president. And when you think about his first presidency, he was surrounded by several different advisors who talked about foreign policy with him. And when you hear from his former security advisors, those people were able to keep him away from his worst instincts. But, here we are, in 2024, hard to tell with whom he'll actually surround himself this time around. What concerns do you have there?
Well, lots of them. And, he's impulsive. We know that. We've seen that many times. He has played with the idea of withdrawing the United States from NATO, whether that was just a bargaining ploy or genuine. It's very difficult to say. So on the economic side, on the security side, and many different dimensions of U.S. foreign policy, I think that there are big questions about what he might do. He's likely to be less restrained than he was the first time, not just because he'll have fewer people around him who have a different view of the world, but more generally because he's already been president once. He seems to be a little angrier, a little bit more vindictive in his comments on the campaign trail. The attempt to hold him accountable for some of his actions not only effectively failed, but led to a Supreme Court decision that says that he's essentially immune from criminal liability for anything that he does while he's in office, and he never will run again for president. So I think that anything is possible, and we need to be ready for an extremely unpredictable 4 years.
You use the word unpredictable, and of course, one big question is around Ukraine. There has been talk from Donald Trump about ending the Ukrainian war. His brag is he could do it in one day. He has this pre-existing relationship with Vladimir Putin. In fact, according to Bob Woodward, the journalist, Putin and Trump maintained communications even after Trump left the White House. So I wonder if Ukraine's fight to stay independent is now in trouble.
Yeah, I think that this is really a difficult development for Ukraine. As you say, Donald Trump has said that he would end the war in 24 hours. He's never said what his plan would be to end the war. J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, has offered some ideas about freezing the battle lines in place and providing Russia with a guarantee that Ukraine would never be a member of NATO, but we don't know whether what J.D. Vance said represents Trump's thoughts at all. The risk here is that he's said that he could solve this problem very quickly. And on the other side is Vladimir Putin, who's not under the same kind of time pressures. And the danger is that Donald Trump will effectively sell Ukraine out and force them into an agreement with Russia that gives Russia basically the territory that it's conquered and doesn't create enough of a security guarantee for what's left of Ukraine going forward. And he could force Ukraine to do this by effectively making continued U.S. support of Ukraine contingent on Ukraine agreeing. Who knows what's going to happen? But I should say that there are some people in Ukraine who are hoping that, that there'll be something unexpected coming from Trump in a positive way, because they were getting quite worried about how things were heading with the Biden administration. So time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell, as you say. The other front that we're keeping a close eye on has to do with, of course, the Middle East. President Trump's electoral win was apparently welcomed by the Israeli Prime Minister. We saw him turn to social media. And reportedly, Trump told Netanyahu, and this was back in October, to do what you have to do as he engages in military operations in Gaza and Lebanon. How do you think Trump's election changes the dynamics of the Middle East?
Well, I think it helps Benjamin Netanyahu in a significant way, because even though the Biden administration has not really placed very significant constraints on Netanyahu, it has imposed some constraints, even as recently as saying that there would be restrictions on weapons transfers if more humanitarian aid wasn't allowed to go into the Gaza Strip. Now, Trump has essentially said that he was criticizing Kamala Harris for calling for a ceasefire. Trump said that the Biden administration was forcing Israel to fight with one hand tied behind its back. As you said, he has said that Benjamin Netanyahu knows what he's doing and should be allowed to do what he wants. On the other hand, Trump has also said the killing must come to an end and that Netanyahu should achieve victory quickly and move on. And so it's unclear exactly how what position he will take on this conflict going forward. But I think that this does, at least in the short, maybe even medium term, provide Benjamin Netanyahu with even more flexibility and maybe also consolidates his political position in Israel as well.
Mm-hmm. So questions about Israel, questions about Ukraine, questions about NATO. Where does that leave Canada, Roland, in terms of trying to navigate foreign policy with the United States being our closest and nearest ally?
Well, there's a set of questions about how we manage our bilateral relationship with the United States, which is obviously a matter of absolutely central interest to Canada. And there's also a question about how we're going to be managing our foreign policy beyond North America in relation to these changed circumstances. On the bilateral level, the last Trump administration was a three-alarm fire for Canada's national interests, primarily because of our economic dependence on the United States. The fact that we not only send 76% of our manufactured goods to the United States, but that hides the reality, which is that our economies are intertwined. And so there were a lot of unexpected developments during the first Trump administration, including his threat to tear up the NAFTA, including tariffs on steel and aluminum and other threats. And Canada had to be very nimble in heading some of these problems off, activating relationships that Canadian government and other Canadian actors had throughout the United States. That is something that's going to have to happen again, but we don't know what's in store for us this time. The first challenge might be if Trump announces across-the-board new tariffs on imports to the United States, as he's threatened to do many times. That will be a very significant challenge for Canada.
Well, an uncertain road ahead. We're all watching very closely. Roland Paris, thank you for this. Appreciate for the time.
Thank you.